We don't have time to go into it, but that issue needs to be fully discussed as we complete this NDAA. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank each of you for being here. I was, again, so happy to point out how grateful I am for my dad's service with the 14th Air Force in India and China. And so I've just grown up, and I grew up in the holy city of Charleston, South Carolina, in the shadow of the Charleston Air Force Base. And so I just have, and I have a nephew in the Air Force too. So, hey, very proud of y'all's service. Secretary Kendall, you've clearly articulated the urgent need to transform and modernize U.S. Air Force. I support the Air Force's plan to modernize its fighter fleet where smart and necessary to divest aircraft to maximize our ability to field the most ready and lethal force possible. I'm concerned, though, that the Air Force is taking the path of least resistance when it comes to fighter roadmap. I understand the Air Force basing plan simply places F-35 at F-15C locations instead of those locations best suited to build and preserve F-35 combat readiness. What is your position that current and future F-35 basing decisions will include both a short and longer-term readiness criteria, and that you'll expand the candidate list beyond the installations with retiring aircraft? And second, will you ensure that you or will direct your staff to seek out and evaluate creative basing solutions that provide for cost-effective, innovative basing solutions?
Congressman, I haven't had a chance to look at F-35 basing decisions yet in my tenure, but I will promise you to do so. Mission performance is going to be a very fundamental concern, and I don't think we should be overly constrained as we look at that metric. We need to support combatant commanders in all the theaters where we need to worry about high-end threats, but also we need to have forces that can flex and go support where they're needed when they're called upon. And I know we are deploying F-35s and basing F-35s forward, both in Europe and in the Pacific. Alaska is one of the bases that we've selected, which can provide support in either direction fairly efficiently. So those things I know are taken into account, but I haven't had a chance to review them personally. And I am open to creative ideas about this. I am always open, I hope, to creative ideas to improve our performance or our capabilities. I'll let General Brown comment. I'm sure he has more on that.
I appreciate the question. One of the areas is we are really looking more broadly across not only our fighter fleet, but many of our other fleets, stepping back and taking a more strategic look at what's the right basing based on the current environment, what we project the environment to be vis-a-vis the threat here in the future. And that will actually drive us into, as the Secretary described, being a little bit more creative than the way we've done things historically going forward for basing for fighters and other capabilities as well.
Thank you, both of you, for that. And again, Mr. Secretary, I'm grateful to work with Congressman Jim Clyburn, who physically represents the McIntyre Joint National Guard base, and which is so advantageous for long-term F-35 readiness. It is a U.S. Air Force owned and operated autonomous federal installation. It maintains an F-35 compatible infrastructure, provides exceptional clear airspace, and welcome to the community too. They like the sound of freedom. Has appropriated funding for F-35 compatible simulator facility, possesses organic ranges, hosts the best training environment on the East Coast with the most clear, again, without interfering with local communities, and retains unlimited space for growth and enjoys limited encroachment concerns. My question, will you work with Congressman Jim Clyburn and myself in a bipartisan effort to evaluate a F-35 basing plan for McIntyre Joint National Guard base, which not only affords the infrastructure for F-35 to thrive for decades, but also yields a modernized F-16 Block 52s for capture and use by the active Air Force institutional requirements, as well as capitalization of the fighter wing inside the Air National Guard?
Yes, Congressman, happy to work with you on that.
And I hope you visit beautiful Eastover, South Carolina, where, Senator Clyburn's so lucky he represents such a wonderful community, and just, again, Joint Base does great. And then finally, a question in regard to upgrading F-35s. What's the consideration of installations across the Air National Guard for future F-35 basing, Ms. Secretary?
We will be upgrading F-35, some of the ones we bought in earlier configurations. I haven't had an opportunity to look at a plan for exactly how we're going to do that or what units will be affected. Mission requirements would, I think, be the driving concern in that, however. But I will take a look at that as part of the overall F-35 scheme for future fielding.
Thank you.
Thank you very
The
much.
gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Norcross is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome, gentlemen. Obviously, some things have changed, as they do each and every year, but when it comes to the tactical era, it has changed at a more rapid pace, certainly from what we're handed out today. So we heard earlier that back in 2010-12, the last F-22 was $130 million, roughly. That's about $155 million today dollars versus the F-35 as we see it today, around $80 million, or the next block, which could be $90 to $95 million, and the EX and the prices. We're all concerned about the price that we buy these aircraft at. But we also know that 2/3 of the cost, almost 70%, is in the sustainment. So I think having a discussion of how much we're buying it versus how much it's costing us needs to be discussed together, because those are real dollars that are literally making us make decisions today on aircraft that were produced years ago and putting us in a very difficult position. And Gad,
General Brown, in a 2021 op-ed with General Berger coming out of the Marine Corps, you explained that a fundamental change is needed to occur to address the 2018 National Defense Strategy funding priorities was the definition of readiness. How do you define readiness? And how does this budget address the changes to that definition?
I look at readiness as not just based on availability of the capability or the amount of resources, but it's the aspect of our ability to have our airmen are trained to meet the demands to use that equipment in the scenarios that we expect to see in the future. In this particular budget, the areas we put into readiness is into our readiness accounts for our flying hour program, for our weapons and sustainment, but it's also into our operational test and training infrastructure into our ranges. And two of the key ranges that we're focused on is the Nellis Test and Training Range and the Joint Pacific Alaska Range up in Alaska J Park. Those are a couple of key areas. But the other aspect that I'll also tell you that's maybe not so much in the budget, but it's really our processes of how we do this and balance this. So there's ongoing conversations within the Air Force, but I'll also say with the Marine Corps and the Joint Force, how we do this a bit better. Matter of fact, conversations this last week of each of the services defined as readiness a little bit differently. We need to get closer to the same page and not only just look at availability, but capability and the trend lines associated with readiness as we make decisions for force management in the future.
If you have a bunch of aircraft that are ready to go, they can be flown tomorrow, but they're combat ineffective against the adversaries we're going to face, then that doesn't count as readiness. I think that's the key point.
is coming. All else are castles built in the air.